Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Mark Lynn. Namaskar. Coming up in the next hour. India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar tells BRICS Plus Forum that addressing conflicts and tensions effectively is particular need of the day. Also calls for UNSC reforms. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh addresses the Chanakya Defence Dialogue 2024. He says broad India-China consensus to resolve differences along the LAC is proof that continuous dialogue brings solutions. Dissent within the Liberal Party ranks. Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau is given a deadline of October 28 to decide on his future. And Bangladesh government bans Awami League's student wing. The Chhatra League calls it a terrorist organization. Bangladesh is on the boil once again after mass protests that saw the ouster of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in August. So several hundred protesters besieged the presidential palace in Dhaka. They are demanding the removal of the president, Mohammad Shahabuddin. Also, Bangladesh's interim government has banned the student body of the former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Here's our report. Even as Bangladesh is recovering from a mass uprising that saw the ouster of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina in August this year, a fresh controversy has erupted in the country. Several hundred protesters besieged the presidential palace in Dhaka on Tuesday evening and demanded the resignation of President Mohammad Shahabuddin, who became the head of Bangladesh in 2023 under the then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. In another development, Bangladesh's interim government has officially banned the Bangladesh Chhatra League, the BCL, the student wing of the ousted Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina's Awami League party, declaring it a terrorist organization. The Ministry of Home Affairs cited the BCL's history of serious misconduct over the past 15 years, including violence, harassment and exploitation of public resources. The ban under the Anti-Terrorism Act takes effect immediately. Following the ouster of Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh has also seen a dramatic surge in violence against women. Bangladeshi female students marched in Dhaka demanding action by the government.
We wanted to build a new Bangladesh through an uprising where we want to ensure equal rights for men and women. We also want to remove the discrimination that exists in the society regarding the treatment of men and women.
Following the ouster of the Premier Sheikh Hasina, the country saw an increase in atrocities against Buddhists, Christians and Hindus living in the neighboring Bangladesh. Recently, members of the minority Hindu community celebrated Durga Puja under tight security following a spate of attacks against Hindus. With inputs from Naval Singh Parmar, Fuzail Ahmed's report for DD India. On the final day of the BRICS Summit in Kazan in Russia, conflict in Ukraine and West Asia, they dominated the agenda, with many world leaders, calling for de-escalation. The UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said that peace was needed in Gaza, Lebanon, Sudan and Ukraine. Speaking at the BRICS outreach session, which also took place in Kazan, India's External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar said that addressing conflicts and tensions effectively is a particular need of the day. Jaishankar also called for reform of the UNSC.
BRICS has emerged as an important platform for dialogue and discussion to address the global challenges. On the final day of BRICS Summit in Kazan on Thursday, leaders discussed a number of issues, including the need for reform at the UNSC.
By reforming established institutions and mechanisms, especially the UN Security Council in the permanent and the non-permanent categories. So too, the multilateral development banks, whose working procedures are just as outdated as that of the UN.
The day also saw other world leaders expressing concern over the situation in West Asia. India's minister also stressed that addressing conflicts and tensions effectively is particular need of the day.
Addressing conflicts and tensions effectively is a particular need of the day. The situation in the Middle East, West Asia for us, is an understandable concern. There is a widespread anxiety that the conflict would spread further in the region. Any approach has to be fair and durable, leading to a two-state solution.
UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres told BRICS leaders that the world needs peace in Gaza, Lebanon, Ukraine and Sudan.
We need peace in Ukraine, a just peace in line with UN Charter, international law and General Assembly resolutions.
Russian President Vladimir Putin said that Ukraine is being used to create strategic threats to Russia.
And now they don't even hide the goal to defeat Russia in a strategical way. I must say that this is illusion. Who can have only those who doesn't know Russian history, doesn't pay attention to unity formed during the centuries, power of its spirit and solidarity of its people.
Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian also expressed concern of the situation in Middle East, while Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas called for UN resolution for an immediate ceasefire. The BRICS Summit in Russia's Kazan brought together leaders from Russia, India, China, South Africa, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Venezuela, and the UAE. Expanded BRICS has a combined population of about 3.5 billion, or 45% of the world's population. Fuzail Ahmed reporting for DD India.
India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh has said that India and China have been involved in talks at both diplomatic and military levels to resolve their differences in certain areas along the LAC. In his address at the inaugural session of the Chanakya Defence Dialogue 2024 in New Delhi on Thursday, the minister said that following the talks, a broad consensus has been achieved to restore the ground situation based on the principles of equal and mutual security. Sharing his insights on the topic, India Vision for Development and Security, Rajnath Singh stated that development and security are often viewed from separate perspectives, but are in actuality deeply interconnected and mutually reinforcing. The two-day Chanakya Defence Dialogue 2024 is the second edition of the flagship international seminar organized by the Indian Army in partnership with the Centre for Land Warfare Studies.
India and China have been involved in talks both at diplomatic and military levels to resolve their differences in certain areas along the LAC. Pursuant to the talks, broad consensus has been achieved to restore ground situation based on the principles of equal and mutual security. The consensus achieved includes patrolling and grazing to traditional areas. This is the power of engaging in continuous dialogue, because sooner or later solutions will emerge. And I think there is no better place to highlight this power of dialogue than this platform of Chanakya Defence Dialogue.
India's Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said that India will retain restrictions on investments from nations with which it shares land borders. Speaking at the Wharton Business School in the United States on Tuesday, Sitharaman said, and I quote, "We want business, we want investment, but we also need some safeguards because India is located in a neighborhood that is very, very sensitive." She added, and I also quote, "I cannot blindly receive foreign direct investment. It is the truth that money is required for investment, but we should not forget its source," unquote. Asserting that 1 of every 6 people in the world is an Indian, she said that no country, whether the US or China, can ignore New Delhi today. She made these remarks at a panel discussion organized by the Center for Global Development in Washington, D.C.
India's priority is not to impose its dominance. In the sense we are the biggest democracy, we have in the world the largest population, but to enhance its influence. And you just cannot ignore our economy and the way in which it is growing. So you really can't ignore. And also the geopolitical neighborhood in which we live. No country, the US, which is very far away from us, or China, which is very close to us, cannot ignore us.
The 24th of October is observed as the UN Day. It was on this day that the Charter for the global body came into force in 1945. India is the founding member of the United Nations and has been lending the call. It's been leading a call, in fact, for reform of the UNSC. DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh reports from the UN headquarters in New York.
वैश्विक शांति एवं विकास के लिए ग्लोबल संस्थाओं में रिफॉर्म्स आवश्यक है. रिफॉर्म is the key to relevance.
In September this year, Prime Minister Narendra Modi, addressing the Summit of the Future at the UN headquarters in New York, underlined the fundamental issue with multilateral organizations like the United Nations need to reform. The UN is observing its 79th anniversary on 24th October. UN Day marks entry into force in 1945 of the UN Charter, with the ratification of this founding document by the majority of its signatories, including India and the 5 permanent members of the Security Council. United Nations officially came into being on this date. There are currently 193 UN member states.
The focus of this General Assembly session is leaving no one behind. The effort of the international community, all nations gathering at the UN, has been to do a reboot of the multilateral system. This reboot of the multilateral system is going to impact positively all dimensions of the UN system, and last but not the least, on what we can all do together to combat climate change. For us, it is most important that we harness the UN system and the various frameworks for our own national growth and development.
To its initial goals of safeguarding peace, protecting human rights, and promoting economic and social progress, United Nations has added on new challenges like climate change. Yet its ability to play a decisive role in tackling global conflicts and challenges has been put into question in recent years. India has led the call for UNSC reforms for many years.
UN Day is an important day of reflection for the global body to decide on its future course of action and structure so that the challenges of the 21st century could be aligned with solutions of 21st century. With camera person Jaishankar, Shubhendu Ghosh at UN headquarters in New York for DD India.
And still to come here on DD India News Hour. Nearly 25 million votes have already been cast in the US elections as Harris and Trump hit battleground states. World powers raised $1 billion for Lebanon in Paris, but a ceasefire is elusive. And world powers are meeting in Paris, as we say, to raise those urgent humanitarian needs for Lebanon.
Recycle, repair, renew. Are these cool trending terms or age-old traditions?
We started distributing the compost. The residents were really happy. It also made them understand the need for waste management, why segregation was important, because it was happening right in front of their houses.
Over the past years, we also expanded into the area of repair, and that obviously has an additional impact on saving e-waste, and that's an additional area where we see quite some potential.
The panels contain a lot of rare commodities, and you can save a lot of energy if you use recycled materials. It's also extremely important to keep those recycled materials here in Germany.
Biotanks, the sewage water gets recycled. It can be used for different purposes or drained into the ground.
Who will be the next president of United States of America?
Will Donald Trump make a dramatic comeback, or will Kamala Harris become America's first woman president?
It's a tight race to the White House.
The knives are out and the battle lines sharply drawn.
He's becoming increasingly unstable and unhinged.
She's a threat to democracy because she shouldn't even be the candidate.
I'm Amritpal Singh.
I'm Shubhendu Ghosh.
We travel across the United States
to decode the issues at the heart of this polarized election.
Watch this space only on DD India.
You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Now, in the latest poll by Wall Street Journal, the former president and the Republican candidate Donald Trump leads his Democratic rival Kamala Harris 47% to 45%. The poll surveyed 1,500 registered voters with a margin of error of about plus or minus 2.5 percentage points. Another poll by the Financial Times showed Trump ahead of Harris 44% to 43% on the U.S. economy. With only 12 days left for the final verdict, in an attempt to sway voters, both candidates are taking a dig at each other. Now, Vice President Kamala Harris called Donald Trump a fascist, while Trump highlighted the issue of border security under the current government. Well, early voting for the U.S. presidential election is currently on in most states of the United States of America, except for a handful of states where it's either over or, there are a few states that don't allow it at all. But when election day comes on November 5th, millions of voters would have already cast their votes, and they would have done so early by mail or in person. In fact, Amritpal Singh explains to us what this early voting system is all about in the U.S. elections. He caught up with some of the voters who were coming out of the early polling booths in Travis County in Texas. Let's listen in.
2 weeks to the election day, and millions of Americans are already voting in early voting or through mail-in ballots.
Early voting system in the U.S. elections is designed for convenience of voters, that they may cast their votes early or by mailing in ballots if they are traveling out of their counties or are unavailable for some reason on the election day.
Early voting is just voting before election day, and I do it to make sure I don't forget to get out and vote.
I was just trying to beat the crowds and get it done before, all the rest of the people tried to.
While people have different reasons for voting early, convenience being one of them, but in this election, there is this whole question of whether people's vote will be registered. I have one voter with me who's just cast her vote. Why did you opt for early voting?
I think there's a lot of excitement around this election, and I also think there's a lot of anxiety. You are hearing about the election for over a year, and so at this point, you just want to get it over with. So one of the reasons why I voted early was that I just wanted to make sure that my ballot was in, and I wouldn't have to wait in the long line. So both the anxiety and the excitement is what brought me here early.
Given the highly polarized campaign that this one has been, some voters are casting or even not casting early votes because they have apprehensions that their votes could be stolen.
I came in today because I wanted to be sure absolutely that my vote was going to be counted. And so I know with early voting that I could find a spot where there is not a big line, but also not have to worry about any weird things happening on election day where maybe people don't get to actually cast their vote.
I'm a little afraid that my state will throw out early votes, so I want to vote on election day this year.
According to early data, there are hints that Republicans may be cutting into the Democratic edge in early voting. That might cause concern for Democrats who remember 2020, when Democratic mail-in votes were critical to Joe Biden's victory. It could also simply mean that Republicans are doing more to encourage early voting.
While analysts and strategists are trying to read trends into early voting based on who's voting more, is it Republicans, is it the Democratic voters, is it women, communities like Black Americans or Latinos, etc., and trying to read trends into it. But it's too early to call in the U.S. election because early voting counts as much as the voting on the election day. So the House is still open as far as U.S. elections go. With cameraman Sanjay Jena, this is Amritpal Singh for DD India in Austin, Texas.
And DD India correspondent Shubhendu Ghosh is now joining us live from Miami in Florida. Shubhendu, good morning. A red state, Florida, traditionally it is red, but early voting trends, what I was just looking up, seem to suggest otherwise. It looks like the Blues are ahead as of early voting. So why is that, one could ask?
Good morning, Mark, from Miami, Florida. Well, before I tell you about the politics, I must tell you about the weather of the state and the city. When we came here, it was cloudy. In fact, it had started drizzling. But in moments, it has become sunny. As unpredictable the weather is, as unpredictable the elections here in Miami and Florida also likely to be seen. And similarly, the same is also represented in the polls that are coming out. Yes, the trend that you're talking about, that is a trend that we're also looking at the moment, where the Democrats seem to have an edge. However, we're also seeing that the Republican early voters, which usually used to be a modest number traditionally, historically, but this time over, a greater number of Republican voters are coming out to exercise their franchise. So it could be anybody's game is what I'm trying to say. It's a very, very close contest. More and more people are coming out to exercise their opportunity for an early voting. One, for convenience. Second, also to ensure that their voice is counting. They don't want to wait till the big election day on November 5th. And want to be able to register support for their candidate. And if I can also tell you that on the surface, it is the presidential elections that is making news and which is in the focus. But we are in front of the Miami Beach voting center. It's been brisk voting since morning today. And the voters have a lot to vote for. It's not just the presidential election. Besides choosing the next U.S. president, they also have to vote for the U.S. representative. They have to vote for the clerk of court here, the sheriff, property appraiser, tax collector, U.S. Senate, also district court of appeal candidate. All in all, there are 6 pages of voting that the voters have to do, diverse candidates that they have to choose from. There are also important amendments that the voters have to put their stamp on. There is, of course, the abortion access amendment, constitutional amendment. There's also the one on legalizing the recreational use of marijuana. So it's a busy day for the voters who are coming in for an early vote. They're going in, but they're taking a lot of time to come out because they have to get through 6 pages of candidates across different levels of the government. Mark?
Yes, I can quite understand that. It will take a long time to get through all that, each voter, so it'll be pretty long, the crowds. But, what kind of issues are being raised or surfacing at the fag end of the campaign? We are seeing a lot of, personal attacks and vilification campaigns, in a sense.
Mark, we've been speaking to supporters of both the sides here at this voting center. They've been pretty clear about who their candidate is. They're voting on the issues of women's rights, whichever way they think a particular candidate is taking the right stand. They're also concerned about illegal immigration. They think that the country, their respective city and states are affected by illegal immigration. There's a broader interest in the economy as well. But what we heard passionately was for the support of their respective candidate, a certain cult support where the importance of the candidate is really way above the issues that they seem to represent. So here in Miami, we see voters who we could speak to and who were willing to talk about their choices, are very clear about the candidates who they support.
Okay, Shubhendu, thanks very much for joining us. Shubhendu Ghosh covering the elections for us. He's in Florida right now. Moving on then, the popularity of the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is fast on the wane. Heightened tensions between India and Canada have only added to his woes. Trudeau's standing within his own party and the Canadian public is low. Many view his approach as reckless and politically motivated, further eroding his support base. This report has more.
It seems like Justin Trudeau is facing significant challenges within his own Liberal Party. Reports indicate that over 20 Liberal MPs have urged him to step down before the next election. Trudeau has been given a deadline of October 28th to decide on his future. The internal dissent highlights growing unease within the party ranks, especially with recent by-election defeats and poor polling numbers. Canada's baseless allegations against India have cost Trudeau, particularly the allegations against the killing of terrorist Hardeep Singh Nijjar without evidence. The rift widened within his own party, and since then he's bearing the brunt.
When we tell them, saying, look, you have people openly threatening leaders of India, diplomats of India. Sometimes the threat is not just verbal, it's physical. So their answer is freedom of speech. If you threaten the Indian High Commissioner, he is supposed to accept it as freedom of speech. But if an Indian journalist says the Canadian High Commissioner walked out of South Block looking very grumpy, it is apparently foreign interference.
People are angry with Justin Trudeau for several reasons. They believe he has shown weakness as a leader. Trudeau's foreign, social and climate policies have faced criticism. Many simply feel tired of Trudeau, seeing him as an entitled figure who has not lived up to expectations.
In order to divert attention from China Gate, Trudeau very wisely thought to amplify, to play up India, but to distract attention within his own country on his leadership failures.
Several names are being floated as potential successors to Justin Trudeau within the Liberal Party. These include Chrystia Freeland, the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister, Melanie Joly, the Foreign Affairs Minister, Anita Anand, the current Treasury Board President, Frank Baylis, a former Liberal MP who has expressed his interest in running for the leadership, and Christy Clark, a former Premier of British Columbia. They are seen to represent a mix of experience and fresh perspectives that the Liberal Party is looking for going forward. Bureau Report, DD India.
Now moving towards West Asia, where Israel has been facing mounting pressure to end the war after reaching a hostage and ceasefire deal following the death of Yahya Sinwar. On Thursday, the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken had met Qatari officials, and he's also sought momentum on the ceasefire. On the other hand, world powers are meeting in Paris. They did so on Thursday, aiming to raise at least 500 million euros in urgent humanitarian aid for Lebanon. Here's the report.
In a significant escalation of hostilities, Hezbollah launched dozens of rockets towards northern Israel on Thursday morning. Explosions and air raid sirens were heard over the Naharia town, and 3 people were wounded in the Klil village. In a recent attack on Gaza Strip, the Israeli military said that it had hit a command and control center of Hamas on a school in Gaza's Nusayrat camp on Thursday. At least 16 Palestinians killed and 32 were injured in the attack. Meanwhile, world powers are meeting in Paris, aiming to raise at least 500 million euros in urgent humanitarian aid for Lebanon and push for a ceasefire. French President Emmanuel Macron also reiterated his call for a ceasefire in Lebanon.
In the immediate term, massive aid must be provided to the Lebanese population. The United Nations has launched an appeal for the 426 million euros. France will provide 100 million euros at this conference. The war must end as soon as possible. There must be a ceasefire in Lebanon.
During the meeting, Foreign Policy Chief of European Commission has also announced $60 million to Lebanese army for the next 2 years.
We, the European Union, will give this year 20 million, next year 40 million to the Lebanese army. And from the point of view of humanitarian support, almost 80 million euros will be donated for humanitarian support alone.
On Thursday, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken landed in Qatar and met with Qatari officials who have been key mediators for Hamas.
We talked about options to capitalize on this moment and next steps to move the process forward. And I anticipate that our negotiators will be getting together in the coming days.
This was Blinken's first trip to the country since the death of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who was the most wanted enemy. Now Washington is hoping Sinwar's death last week can provide an impetus for peace in the region. Aman Kumar Himanshu's report for DD India.
The German Chancellor Olaf Scholz will be visiting India at the invitation of Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The German Chancellor, along with Prime Minister Narendra Modi, will co-chair the 7th intergovernmental consultations on October 25. The two leaders will also hold bilateral talks to discuss enhanced security and defense cooperation, greater opportunities for mobility of talent, deeper economic cooperation, green and sustainable development partnership, and collaboration in the area of emerging and strategic technologies. Discussions will also focus on important regional and global developments. Both leaders will also address the 18th Asia-Pacific Conference of German businesses being held in New Delhi on October 25. Chancellor Scholz has visited India twice last year for the bilateral state visit in February of 2023 and also to attend the G20 Leaders Summit in September of the same year. India and Germany have a strategic partnership since the year 2000. The two countries are celebrating 50 years, in fact, of science and technology collaboration this year. Well, Deutsche Welle political correspondent Thomas Sparrow is joining us from Berlin in Germany. And, well, Thomas, can you tell us more about the agenda of the consultations in the light of the German Chancellor's visit to India?
Chancellor Scholz and Prime Minister Modi will co-chair the consultations on 25th of October. They will also hold bilateral talks and will address the Asia-Pacific Conference of German Business in New Delhi. The Indian government has said that about 650 business leaders from Germany, from India and from other countries are expected to participate in this event. And then on Saturday, the Chancellor will go to Goa, where a German naval frigate and a replenishment ship are making a scheduled port call as part of Germany's Indo-Pacific deployment. And by the way, this Indo-Pacific deployment has been described by the German military as the German Navy's most important defense, diplomacy and security cooperation project for this year.
Thomas Sparrow in Berlin, thanks very much. Now, still to come here on DD India News Hour. We're going to get expert opinion on the state of affairs in Bangladesh. India's Union Cabinet has approved the establishment of a venture capital fund for the space sector. And Kolkata and the eastern coast, they prepare to tackle the impact of Cyclone Dana. Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy, always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the Economic Brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India. You're watching DD India News Hour. I'm Mark Lynn. Here's a recap of our main stories. India's External Affairs Minister Jaishankar tells the BRICS Plus Forum that addressing conflicts and tensions effectively is the particular need of the day. He calls for UNSC reforms. India's Defence Minister Rajnath Singh addresses the Chanakya Defence Dialogue 2024 and says broad India-China consensus to resolve differences along the LAC is proof that continuous dialogue brings solutions. And dissent within the Liberal Party ranks. Canada's Prime Minister Trudeau is given a deadline of October 28 to decide on his future. Now, going back to our earlier story on Bangladesh, we are joined by Ambassador Riva Ganguly Das, former Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh. Thank you, Ambassador Das, for being with us. Do you see this uprising that's taking place as a continuation of the earlier one? Do you feel that the protesters are, not in a position to identify their medium to long-term goals?
Bangladesh is going through a lot of political turmoil, and we have seen that since Sheikh Hasina left Dhaka on 5th August, since then there have been a lot of agitations, protests. Everybody who has a grievance comes out in the street and is protesting. Law and order has still not been established. A lot of policemen have still not come back on to work, and government is still struggling to establish some degree of governance which is visible. So under these circumstances, the protests and this kind of agitation has become the order of the day. But the reason for protests are very different, of course, because till 5th August, it was very focused initially on the removal of the quotas, and thereafter on, in the last few days on removal of resignation of Sheikh Hasina, who was the Prime Minister then. And now the latest agitation, which has seen the students on the roads again and protesting, is that they want the resignation of the president of Bangladesh, President Shahabuddin. So that is really the protest. So it is not really a continuation in my view. I mean, for the students, the agitation has really continued. But, it is their own government. They have formed this government. So they are actually, in effect, protesting against their own government, a government that they have formed. And some of them are part of this government.
Indeed. Indeed.
That's the situation.
Ma'am, India engages with the government of the day, obviously, and maintains good neighborly ties. So to what extent are these testing times for India?
Well, for our bilateral relations, this has been very, very difficult because just before 5th August, what we saw was, our relations were at their height. We often described it as the golden chapter in our relationship. We achieved a lot in the last several years because, Bangladesh also had a stable, peaceful political system. There were no agitations, there were no street, agitations, which was the order of the day in the earlier decade. So that led to economic growth, that led to lots of opportunities for India and Bangladesh. We were able to achieve a lot in terms of, the connectivity projects, the train lines which are working. 3 passenger trains were running, cargo movement on trains, and excellent cooperation, in fact, sub-regional cooperation in energy trade. And, people-to-people contact has always been one of the strengths of our relationship. So at all levels, economic, if you say economic, trade, investment, at every level, the relationship was at its peak. And then suddenly, now with the departure of Sheikh Hasina and with a very strong anti-India sentiment in the country, it's been very challenging times for India. But as India has very clearly said, it wants to build relationship, it wants to have cooperation. But of course, the biggest challenge at this point of time is to build trust and to, this truly negative narrative about India, which is the country, needs to be, in some sense, we need to bring some order into that and some sense into that, because, a lot of what is going on is absolutely incorrect, in fact, what is being said.
Given what you're saying, Ambassador Das, what kind of political order do you think is in the making in Bangladesh? Because if they want the president out, and the president is largely, an office without too much real power, what actually are they trying to achieve?
That's a very difficult question, because I think Bangladeshi analysts are themselves grappling with this question, because the latest development which happened actually yesterday, I think, when BNP, one of the largest political parties, has met the chief advisor and told him that they do not favor that the president should step down, because they feel that this would lead to a constitutional crisis which would further delay the election process. So today the advisors have met, the interim government has met in what can roughly be called in a sort of their cabinet meeting, and they've decided that they're going to have more political consultations to come to a conclusion about President's fate. We should also remember that the army chief is presently traveling. He went on a visit to the United States and Canada and expected back today. So he will also, I guess, have a say on this issue. But as of now, it seems that the president is will not be resigning. But the larger issue in the long term, the question is that what does the what does the interim
What is this new
want?
Bangladesh? Because they're talking about a new Bangladesh. What is it really?
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah. So whether they want election first, reform first, what sort of reform, limited reform, full-scale reform, a full new constitution, scrapping of the present constitution.
Right.
So these are a large number of areas which which not only have long-term impact on the country, but these also have very huge legal implications. Now, if you're talking about scrapping the constitution and coming up with a new constitution, who will do the constitution? Once again, you need a constitutional assembly.
That's right.
Will it be elected? What will be the process? So there are many questions which need to be answered, and I think the interim government is also dealing with a very difficult, and uncharted political.
Absolutely, uncharted and volatile. Thank you very much, Ambassador Riva Ganguly Das. Thank you for being with us and enlightening us on the situation in Bangladesh. Now, in more international news, world powers have raised $1 billion to ease the humanitarian crisis in Lebanon and to support its army at a conference in Paris on Thursday, with France's foreign minister urging Israel to heed the message of a ceasefire and to focus on diplomacy. Some 70 government delegations and 15 international organizations met in Paris to help Lebanon. But a low-level U.S. presence and its looming election have dimmed prospects of a swift halt to the fighting. France's foreign minister has said that more than the $800 million, including $300 million from Washington, had been raised primarily to help up to 1 million displaced people with food, healthcare and education. Reiterating his call for a ceasefire in Lebanon, Macron said that France would provide 100 million euros. Lebanon requires about $250 million a month to help millions of people who have been displaced.
In the immediate term, massive aid must be provided to the Lebanese population, whether it is for the hundreds of thousands of people displaced by the war or the communities that are hosting them. The United Nations has launched an appeal for 426 million euros. France will provide 100 million euros at this conference. What is needed is simply to shelter families, feed children, care for the wounded and continue to provide schooling for children. Solutions must be found quickly because we must at all costs prevent the displacement of people from the south, Beirut and other regions of Lebanon and from creating new divisions among the Lebanese people.
Tensions in the Korean peninsula appear to have simmered, with reports of North Korea sending troops to Russia, and this has also been confirmed by the United States. South Korea has warned of not sitting idle over Pyongyang's deployment of troops in Russia. This next report tells us more about the simmering tensions in the Korean peninsula.
Amid reports of North Korea's plan to deploy troops in Ukraine in support of Russia, the lower house of Russia's parliament on Thursday voted to ratify a treaty of partnership between Russia and North Korea. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Yuri Rudenko and Duma Chairman Vyacheslav Volodin praised North Korea for support of Russia's special military operation in Ukraine.
The Democratic People's Republic of Korea has always been supporting our country in the most complicated situations. it has been doing so on the level of international organizations and in regard of a special military operation.
The development triggered reactions from other countries. South Korea has warned it would not sit idle if Pyongyang deployed thousands of troops to help Moscow fight Ukraine.
우리 두 정상은 북한의
We agreed that North Korea's dispatch of troops to Russia is a direct violation of UN Security Council resolution and UN Charter, and is a provocation that goes beyond the Korean Peninsula and Europe to threaten global security. I have made it clear that the Republic of Korea will never tolerate this.
South Korea and Poland also agreed to push to finalize a new contract to export South Korean tanks to Poland by the end of the year. The United States has said there is evidence that North Korea has sent about 3,000 soldiers who are being trained before being deployed to battlefields in Ukraine.
We assess that between early to mid-October, North Korea moved at least 3,000 soldiers into eastern Russia. We assess that these soldiers traveled by ship from the Wonsan area in North Korea to Vladivostok, Russia. These soldiers then traveled onward to multiple Russian military training sites in eastern Russia.
China has said that it is not aware of any such development of troop deployment of North Korea in Russia.
On your first question, the Chinese side is not aware of the situation. On your second question, China's position on Ukraine crisis has been consistent and clear.
Amid high tensions in the region, South Korea and the United States have conducted joint air drills to further improve operational sustainability and support capabilities. The 12-day Freedom Flag exercise got underway across various air bases in South Korea, mobilizing over 110 aircraft, including the South's stealth fighters. Bureau Report, DD India.
Well, let's take a look now at some other stories making the news around the world. Bulgarians are set to vote in their 7th snap election in just 4 years this Sunday as political parties continue to struggle to form a stable coalition, with polls showing no clear winner and no obvious path for a coalition. Voter apathy is on the rise. Pope Francis has called on the world's 1.4 billion Catholics to turn away from the mad pursuit of money and focus on their faith. In a new encyclical letter, Francis emphasized spiritual over political themes, a shift from his previous writings that addressed issues like climate change and economic inequality. Rohingya migrants, including children, arrived in Indonesia's North Sumatra province in a second wave of landings within a week. A boat carrying 64 men, 62 women and 20 children reached the Delhi Serdang area, with 6 additional refugees found later in the day, bringing the total to 152. India's space sector is poised for an exponential growth, with the Union Cabinet approving the establishment of $120 million venture capital fund for the space sector under the aegis of InSpace. This move is set to, in fact, provide a significant impetus to innovation and entrepreneurship in space technology and applications. The Information Broadcasting Minister, Ashwini Vaishnav, highlighted the transformative impact of this decision. Let's listen.
The Union Cabinet has today approved setting up a venture capital fund with a corpus of 1,000 crore rupees for promoting startups in the space sector. This reflects our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi ji's commitment toward creating more and more opportunities for our youth, more and more opportunities for our entrepreneurs, and more opportunities for innovative startups.
The cyclone Dana, which formed over East Central Bay of Bengal, it's now taken a severe form and is heading towards the Odisha coast. Cyclone Dana is expected to make a landfall somewhere between Bhitrakanika and Dhamra, which is going to happen late Thursday night or, in fact, early Friday morning. The Odisha government has issued a high alert for the next 48 hours. The Chief Minister of Odisha, Mohan Charan Mahi, is reviewing the preparedness for the severe cyclone with secretaries and Special Relief Commissioner at Bhubaneswar. Meanwhile, India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi has discussed the preparations to deal with Cyclone Dana, and he also spoke to the Odisha Chief Minister Mohan Charan Mahaji. This happened over the phone. In neighbouring state of West Bengal as well, rains have lashed coastal districts in view of Cyclone Dana and the impact on the coastal region of West Bengal. Flight operations at Kolkata's Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose International Airport have been temporarily suspended. Okay, we are joined by our correspondent Urmilesh, who is in Paradeep in Odisha, and he's going to speak to me in Hindi. Urmilesh ji, अब स्थिति कैसी है और लैंडफॉल कब होगा, बताइए।
जी मार्क, बिल्कुल अब जो है स्थिति जिस तरीके से कि यहाँ पर मौसम विभाग ने जानकारी दी है कि ये लगभग मध्य रात्रि में जो है ये लैंडफॉल होगा। ये लैंडफॉल धामरा और पारादीप के बीच में तो भीतर कनिका राजनगर जो जगह है वहाँ पर इस लैंडफॉल होने की संभावना है। और इस बीच जो है प्रशासन ने अपनी पूरी तैयारी जो है रविवार से ही शुरू कर दी थी, जब जो भारत के केंद्रीय गृह सचिव हैं उन्होंने जो है रविवार को कोलकाता और उड़ीसा के तमाम जो आला अधिकारी हैं उनसे बैठक की थी और हर संभव जो है यहाँ पर जो भी मदद चाहिए थी उस मदद का आश्वासन दिया था। लिहाजा अगर बात उड़ीसा की जाए बात तो यहाँ पर जो है NDRF है, ODRF है और उसके अलावा जो है यहाँ पर जो अग्निशमन बल भी यहाँ पर जो है तैनात किया गया है। जो क्रिटिकल एरिया थे जहाँ पर कि संवेदनशील जो एरिया है उन एरियाओं से तमाम लोगों को जो है जो सिक्योर जगह है, जो सुरक्षित जगह है जहाँ पर कि शिविर बनाए गए, शेल्टर होम्स बनाए गए हैं, उन शेल्टर्स होमों में जो है यहाँ पर शिफ्ट किया गया है। और अब जो है इस समय अगर बात की जाए तो इस समय की ये स्थिति है कि यहाँ पर लगातार बारिश हो रही है, बहुत तेज़ हवाएं चल रही हैं और अब से कुछ ही समय बाद जिस तरीके से कि मैट डिपार्टमेंट ने कहा है कि लगभग ये 12 बजे के आसपास जो है इसकी टकराने की जो है संभावना है। और अब जो है यहाँ पर तमाम जो NDRF की टीम है, ODRF की टीम है और साथ ही जो है यहाँ पर अग्निशमन की जो टीम है वो जो है मैदान में उतर गई है और तमाम लोगों को जो है यहाँ पर जो है लाउड स्पीकर से जो अनाउंसमेंट किया जा रहा है कि आप सुरक्षित जगह पर चली जाइए और किसी भी समय जो है यहाँ पर लैंडफॉल हो सकता है। ऐसे में आप घरों से बाहर न निकलिए। कुछ देर के लिए यहाँ पर जो है लाइट भी कट आउट हो सकती है जो है सिक्योरिटी के हिसाब से, सुरक्षा के हिसाब से। तो ऐसे में जो है यहाँ पर प्रशासन की तरफ से पूरी तैयारियाँ की गई हैं। इंडियन कोस्ट गार्ड और इंडियन नेवी को जो है यहाँ पर अलर्ट मोड में रखा गया है। इसकी इंडियन नेवी की 2 शिप को जो है अलर्ट मोड पर रखा गया, तो वहीं कोस्ट गार्ड को जो है अलर्ट मोड पर रखा गया है। जो लगभग 46 गोताखोर हैं उनको जो है अलर्ट मोड में रखा गया है। तो प्रशासन की हर तरफ से कोशिश है कि जो कैजुअलिटी हो, जीरो कैजुअलिटी हो। ऐसे में जो है अब देखना होगा जब मिडनाइट में ये जो है यहाँ पर लैंडफॉल होगा, उसके बाद कल सुबह यानी फ्राइडे मॉर्निंग को जो है क्या इसका असर होता है, कितना असर देखा जा सकता है मार्क। लेकिन फिलहाल अभी ये है कि राहत शिविरों में जो शेल्टर होम बनाए गए हैं उन शेल्टर होमों में जो है खाने पीने की व्यवस्था की गई है, डॉक्टर की वहाँ पर व्यवस्था की गई है। साथ ही जो एनिमल्स हैं, जो पशु हैं, उनके लिए भी वेटनरी डॉक्टर पशुओं को भी जो है सुरक्षित जगह पे जो है ले जाया गया है। तो ऐसे कह सकते हैं कि प्रशासन अपनी तरीके से पूरी कोशिश में है कि यहाँ पर जीरो कैजुअलिटी हो और साथ ही ये सुनिश्चित कर रहा है कि जब ये लैंडफॉल हो उस समय जो है यहाँ पर किसी प्रकार की कोई जान की हानि न हो। मार्क
राइट, धन्यवाद उर्मिलेश। And Urmilesh has joined us from Paradeep and he's braving the situation. He's talked about the possibility of landfall between midnight and early tomorrow morning. He said that the authorities have taken every single precaution for not only humans but also for animals. And apart from that, the Indian Navy, the NDRF, the SDRF, all these forces have been on alert. The administration is on alert. Warnings have been set out. Everyone is sort of prepared and they have a target to have 0 casualties as far as this cyclone Dana is concerned when it makes landfall. As we can see already that he is in the rain and it's likely that it's going to make landfall in a short, maybe in a few hours from now. Midnight is what he was talking about. Moving on then, India's Ministry of Panchayat Raj on Thursday launched a weather forecast service for Gram Panchayats, which will provide them with localized daily weather forecasts. The availability of weather forecast for the panchayat level will help farmers and villagers in disaster management. A training workshop on weather forecasting was also organized at the Gram Panchayat level. India's Minister of State, Dr. Jitendra Singh, highlighted that this technology, in fact, will significantly improve the lives of farmers and rural citizens.
No, I think realizing the importance of agriculture and also aligning it with the modern technology. This is one of the major initiatives under Prime Minister Modi, and you must have realized that in the last 10 years, since 2014, one after the other, Prime Minister has lived up to his commitment of, when he said doubling farmers' income, one after the other, the technology and the cutting edge new techniques were brought in the farming sector. And as far as the weather forecast is concerned, now India has developed state-of-the-art competence. And gone are the times when we were having a very limited resource. Now we are combining space technology with radar, and we have apps, we have WhatsApp groups which are dedicated exclusively to the farmers.
India's Minister of State for Information and Broadcasting and Parliamentary Affairs, L. Murugan, inaugurated the 14th INSPA International Conference on Research Prospects in School Psychology at the Central University of Tamil Nadu in Tiruvarur. This happened on Thursday. Sponsored by ICSSR, this three-day event features delegates from countries including Russia, France and Japan. The conference includes workshops, a children's assembly and also award ceremony recognizing excellence in school psychology. As Nepal's ruling alliance reviews the government's 100-day performance at Prime Minister Oli's residence, Prime Minister Oli dismissed rumours about the coalition's potential collapse, asserting that attempts to break this alliance between the UML and the Nepali Congress are futile. Meanwhile, opposition leaders, including the CPN Maoist, the centre chair, which is Pushpa Kamal Dehal, they met with the President Ramchandra Paudel, urging him not to approve any ordinance that could facilitate splits within political parties. They allege that Prime Minister Oli is planning to introduce such an ordinance to bolster his party's standing in the House of Representatives. An emergency was declared at Sri Lanka's Bandaranaike International Airport on Thursday due to a bomb scare on a Vistara flight from Mumbai to Colombo. What happened was that this flight was scheduled to arrive at 15:15 hours, but it landed safely at 14:55 hours. Following a non-specific bomb threat call, security agencies implemented precautionary measures. All 107 passengers and 8 crew were safely evacuated to the terminal. So in the end, we leave you with the United Nations Resident Coordinator in India, Shombi Sharp, wishing all the viewers of DD a happy UN Day, and he did so in Hindi. With that, we leave you. Good night and goodbye. Namaskar.
So, आप सबको UN Day की हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं. Thank you.